Livingston and Fulton cleared a profit their very first year, were able to use those profits to build another boat, a faster boat, a bigger boat, and on and on and on and on.
After the Revolutionary War, economic opportunities drew many well-capitalized New Englanders to New York City. Free from British domination and restrictions, the young nation was ready to win her share of the world's trade. Tea and silks, apples, cotton, lumber, all were arriving and leaving through New York Harbor. The tip of Manhattan could no longer hold the commercial buildings and luxury homes the growing city required. Brooklyn, Staten Island, and New Jersey became populated, with the commute to Manhattan being made by ferry. Fulton and Livingston serviced this need with several steam ferries working the East and Hudson rivers. As the captains of the mighty sailing ships passed through the harbor, they must have been curious at the ever-increasing steamboat traffic around them. These early steam-powered ferries were upwards of 175 feet long and displaced close to 300 tons. Though they bear little resemblance to a tugboat, these ferries are parents to the modern tug, for it is from them that towing was born. The paddle wheels themselves could be as tall as a 5-story building. Steam pressure was low at 5 pounds per square inch, but was powerful enough to drive pistons 4 feet in diameter. For the 1820s New York citizen, these massive ferries were a marked symbol of an emerging modern industrial age. At some point, someone must have realized the usefulness of the steamboat's towing capabilities.
You have to assume that because the people who were running these newfangled steamboats were among the kind of the upper echelon of local mariners in the harbor, that they were always willing to try out new aspects of what these new steamboats were capable of.
We know Robert Fulton used 2 of his ferries in 1811 to tow an experimental warship he had constructed in Brooklyn to New Jersey for outfitting.
And it must have been a pretty exciting event for people in the city to watch this, because the Fulton Battery, so-called, of the warship was big and very unusual in and of itself. And then to be towed by these 2 newfangled steamboats must have drawn a lot of attention.
Another notable early tow took place in January 1819, when the ferry Nautilus towed the disabled merchant ship Corsair.
The Corsair was beset by ice coming down out of the Hudson River and down through the Narrows, and it was in some peril of its anchors being dragged, out over the shoals and
The Corsair had just finished an arduous 3-month transatlantic crossing and was low on food, with several of its crew sick, when it became stuck in the ice 1 mile outside of the upper harbor. They signaled for assistance, and the steam ferry Nautilus came to her aid, towing them to Staten Island.
the job that the Nautilus did was really, as much as anything, a rescue. Generally, that moment is recognized as the beginning of the New York harbor business of assisting ships in and out of the harbor. The captains themselves were generally reluctant to engage the services of a tug unless there was a compelling danger. They were very, very frugal people, and they were very used to just enduring the circumstances of the voyage.
The reluctance of proud captains to take a tow would soon be overshadowed by the demand for speed and efficiency. In 1820, a new form of shipping called packet service was introduced by the Black Ball Line. Instead of departing only when ships were filled with passengers and cargo, Black Ball ships would make scheduled sailings, irregardless of how many people or goods were on board. This allowed merchants and passengers to have a reliable date of departure and arrival. It was a simple idea that proved a great success. Because these scheduled ships could not sit outside the harbor for weeks waiting for favorable conditions to get in, steamboats would be called on in ever-increasing numbers to keep the ships on schedule. By 1832, the frequency of ferries diverting to take a lucrative tow was so common, Brooklyn passed an ordinance forbidding ferries from doing tow work while on a scheduled run. It wasn't long before the ferry boat designs were being modified exclusively for tow work. These vessels had an open, low stern, allowing the tow rope, known as a hawser, to sweep freely from side to side. Since power is what defines the usefulness of a tugboat, owners were always looking for ways to maximize horsepower. New developments in boiler technology allowed for increased steam pressure, applying more power to the paddle wheels, which had greater efficiency with the development of feathering. Coal, a greater source of heat than wood, became the preferred fuel. All of these developments pointed the way for the business of towing to become an industry unto itself.
I've got a mule, her name is Sal, 15 miles on the Erie Canal.
Another factor that increased usage of tugboats was the opening of the Erie Canal. This aquatic highway linking Albany with Buffalo lowered the cost of shipping goods from $100 a ton to $15. Now, settlers in the Midwest were able to trade their wheat, lumber, and cattle for much-needed machinery and luxury items. Barges laden with these goods were pulled by mule along the canal between Albany and Buffalo. The barges were then towed in large flotillas by steamboats along the Hudson River. The demand for towboats and luxury passenger service spawned several steamboat companies on the Hudson River. Towing a string of barges was tricky work. Collisions and wrecks were common and considered a part of doing business. The Hudson River is narrow at its northern end, with many shifting shoals and shallows. If one of the barges went aground, the steamboat had to stop, sending the entire tow adrift in the current. Meeting oncoming traffic at night, thick fog, and high winds all challenged the skills of the captain and crew. Often, a smaller tug would accompany the tow for part of the route, assisting in rounding up stranded barges. Today, the Hudson River remains active for tugs and barges, carrying on a tradition that began over 180 years ago. Modern equipment and cargo may be different from the early days of towing, but the skills needed to navigate this body of water remain the same.
Keep 'em close and outside, keep 'em close around this bend. Branches have grown here since we come back here again. Well, it's haul, ye mules, haul. We'll get to Buffalo late if we get there at all. I swear I'm gonna leave this job.